What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Met Central podcast, episode number 85, as we will be recapping the series that the Mets just played against the Atlanta Braves, taking 2 out of 3, finishing off their road trip 3-3, which, like the title says, is not good enough at all. Which we'll talk more about all that stuff, talk about the series coming up, arguably the biggest series of the season thus far, as the Mets will play the Phillies. So we got a good amount to get into in this episode. Before we jump into everything, I ask that you please leave a like on your way into the live show, or if you're watching on replay, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on the channel. But yeah, they wrap up the road trip 3-3, and I'm very underwhelmed. I'm very underwhelmed for a multitude of reasons. Number one, when you look at the teams that you're playing in the Nationals and Braves, you should be beating up on these teams. And to me, 5-1, nothing less was acceptable to me. They dropped the series to the Nationals, which was problematic to begin with. But here's a chance to right the wrong of some of the road trip. After you win the first 2 games against the Braves, you're going against Bryce Elder, David Peterson's on the mound. Here is your chance to not go 5-1, but 4-2, and keep yourself within 6 games of the Phillies, which at least would be somewhat better. I mean, not that it really matters at this point because the NL East is most likely over at this point. I guess we'll see how these next 3 games go, because if the Mets somehow sweep, sure, they're back in the mix for it. But right now, I'm sitting here very underwhelmed because you had to win that last game. And the biggest thing, which we've talked about at nauseum, which is mentioned every single night on the broadcast, the fact that they cannot come back when trailing in the 8th inning on. They're 0-53 in games this year when trailing from the 8th inning on. And I thought when Juan Soto got that single, I'm like, maybe this is finally the game where you see them actually mount a little bit of a comeback here. Who knows if they win, but at least they show some sort of fight and show some sort of comeback. They fall short of it, and it just summarizes the season. A lot of things throughout the series with the manager. Again, I'm questioning certain things already coming up this week against the Phillies about his decisions, but which also kind of ties to Stearns with what I'm referring to in that. But yeah, 3-3, underwhelming. Matt, I'll let you jump in. How are we feeling after the Mets take 2 out of 3, but overall just an underwhelming road trip?
Listen, it is a series win, and I've been saying for the last couple weeks, ever since the Mets have been in this big slide, that they just have to get back in the groove of winning series. But I agree with you, 3-3, considering when you look at the caliber of the teams that they played, it's not good enough. Look, my frustration more lies with because I said before they even went on this road trip that after you beat the Mariners in that 3 game set, obviously they took 2 out of 3. I said, listen, go on this road trip, go 4-2, win 2 series. That was simply my goal. Just like I said before, you gotta just build some momentum. And listen, I said going into the finale yesterday that the Mets should sweep the Braves, considering that you had David Peterson on the mound, who arguably has been their best pitcher this year. I mean, even if you want to say second half, David Peterson has been very consistent, and in the way he's given this team innings and just given this team results and stuff like that, and the fact that a lot of his pitches have looked very good over the second half. And obviously they didn't. There was a multitude of reasons of why they couldn't complete the sweep yesterday. Obviously, we'll get into more of that into detail as we get into this podcast. But my my frustration more lies in the fact that you know that instead of because I'm more frustrated that they lost the national series more than the fact that they couldn't sweep the Braves. Because at least when I look at both teams, and both teams haven't been great this year, both the Nationals and the Braves respectively. But when you compare the rosters, the Braves, even though they've underperformed a lot this year and they've dealt with injuries, they are way more of a talented team than the Washington Nationals are because they still have guys like Profar, they still have guys like Olsen, they still have guys like Albies, Harris, Ozuna, Sean Murphy, even though he's had a rough August, things like that. So to me, you should have dealt with the Nationals series, and you should have at least won that series. Arguably, they should have swept that series. So for me, like I said, if they swept the Braves yesterday, I would have easily taken 4-2 because, like I said, before the road trip, I would have taken 4-2. It is what it is. They couldn't sweep the Braves. And like I said, there's a multitude of reasons why they couldn't complete the sweep. But ultimately, my frustration lies more with the fact that this team should have taken care of business against a poor Washington Nationals team.
Yeah, and I get that. My problem is the context that lies within this series where, they looked just defeated the Braves in those first two games, and it looked like you had them where they had you a couple seasons ago, where you were their punching bag. And I would have found it so nice if for once the Braves were the Mets punching bag and they finished the job. It's really just the context of that last game where Bryce Elder sucks against every team but the Mets, apparently. And why is that? Because again, this offense is bipolar, which is why even when they had these big games, and in the series, they had two games where they showed up offensively, 6 home runs. But I can't sit here and get excited over those games because then they have the norm, which was more in line with what yesterday was. And one of the big reasons too, and I'll jump into it just with, what I was referring to, because we'll work backwards here talking about these games a little bit. But my biggest frustration right now is this again ties with Stearns a little bit. I don't understand why they're so reluctant to just use Brandon Sproat because if I had to guess, the reason why they did not go to the sixth starter in this turn of the rotation, which they should have been doing, because David Peterson is not good on regular arrests. Kodai Senga, which we're going to find out tonight, but based on the history and the few times he's done it, he is not good on regular arrest. So my problem is why are they so reluctant on using Sproat? It reeks of them waiting for Tyler McGill to come back, and that's going to be the sixth starter. And they're just trying to push through this one turn of the rotation. I can tell you right now is not the time to be doing this. You're facing the Atlanta Braves, who you should be beating, and you're facing now your biggest test of the season, which is playing a Phillies team that's played better baseball as of lately. And if you still want to show some sort of fight for the division, which again, I don't think they have any shot of winning it. And I find it funny just hearing some Phillies people talk about, oh, well, we got to put the Mets down in case because, they could still maybe come back a bit here. No, I could tell you, Phillies fans, there's no worry about that one. But why are you deciding of all times this is where you want to go with Peterson on regular arrest? This is where you want to go with Senga on regular arrest when the history shows these guys are not as good on regular arrest because Tyler McGill's not ready. You really can't just use Brandon Sproat for a start. To me, that is very, very frustrating. And then you had Sproat out of the bullpen for Syracuse yesterday, which I thought, okay, maybe there's a chance he's coming up and they wanted to just only give him one inning of work, and then he'll come up a little bit later this week. I don't know if that's even in the cards. Are they trying to use him out of the bullpen? Because that's not ideal to me either. Because to me, I know Clay Holmes had a good start, but either him or Sean Manaea, I'd rather see them be bulk guys. Probably more so Sean Manaea at this rate, given the way he looks once he hits the 70 pitch mark. I'd rather see those guys go to the bullpen and watch Brandon Sproat start games right now. So that's something that's just very frustrating me. What are your thoughts on that one, though?
My only thoughts with Sprout is, which again, I understand what people say, like it doesn't make sense, but it also doesn't make sense. Maybe it's just the fact that because I know when you look at the factor of Nolan McLean, and people say, oh, well, they thrusted Nolan McLean in this situation, but maybe it's just the fact that they don't trust Sprout yet in this type of environment, because that's really the only type of explanation I can really come up, because obviously they tried him yesterday out of the bullpen, and initially I think he was supposed to only go one inning, and then they ended up pushing him multiple innings. I think he threw like 3 innings or something like that, and he got roughed up. I think he gave up like 7 earned runs or something like that. So obviously, he didn't look great in that short cameo coming out of the bullpen. But like I said, my only explanation is that maybe they just don't think Sproat's like ready yet to be able to be fully thrusted into this pennant race, as I could call it. Even though, like I agree with you. To me, I think the division is already lost. Like my full 100% focus is just beating out the Reds for that last wild card spot, and maybe even jumping over a few other teams in front of you. But yeah, I mean, I really don't. I really don't agree with it either, just because, like you said, Senga hasn't been going to regular rest ever since he's come over from Japan, and even that, like, the Mets have very rarely threw him on regular rest through his, through he's been here 3 years, but it's basically only two, because last year it's basically you throw last year out the window because of all the injuries and stuff. But yeah, Peterson has shown that he's not big on a regular rest. With Manaea's injuries concerns, do you want to necessarily throw him on regular rest? And then even with Clay Holmes, we've seen the fatigue factors affect him a little bit. So do you want to throw him on regular rest as well? Because pretty much, like I said, that's my only explanation, that that they don't fully trust Sproat in this environment yet. And I mean, listen, could they just be waiting on McGill? Like, sure, I could definitely see that. I don't think that's the best plan to work on, because we've seen Tyler McGill when he's not pitching in March and April. We've seen how much of a disaster he can be. And I mean, look, I guess when you look at McGill, it's just more of that. Like I said, they value more of that veteran presence there. But even then, I think Sproat is more of the future. And personally, for me, I would like to see what he has in this series. But obviously, he's not going to pitch in the series, considering that he just threw 3 innings of work yesterday out of the bullpen for Syracuse. But I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, for me, that's the only explanation that I can see, that they just fully don't trust him yet in this situation to throw him out as a starter, especially against the Phillies.
Yeah, it just like D is saying in the chat here that the play is probably McGill, and I don't agree with it either. And it's not even that McGill has been problematic throughout the season, because honestly, even though there were the struggles right before he got injured with him, he gave you some sort of, innings, and gave you some decent starts here and there. My problem is more, you have September call ups on the horizon. Why don't you just wait to activate McGill then, since either way he needs more time, and you could just use Brand Sprout right now? That's the part that just very, very frustrating to me. And this could be the case that they're waiting to let him face like the Marlins or something, but they could have had him face the Braves easily yesterday. They could have had him face the Braves yesterday. And if anything, I like that idea more, because then you're lining up David Peterson to go tonight against the Phillies on an extra day of rest. You have Senga on the extra day of rest to go tomorrow. And then Wednesday would have been Manaea, I believe. Or if you really wanted to, McLean could pitch on regular rest, since he's done it in the minor league still. So you have him go on Wednesday, and then you shift your rotation around a little bit and have Manaea go Thursday, Holmes go Friday, and then you work it back from there. But that, like, again, it's just very bizarre to me why. And I'm not saying that you're arguing back. I'm just giving you, my perspective of it here. But I don't understand the reluctance to call up Sprout here, other than, like you said, I mean, that's legit the only reason. But you're telling me, even if they call him up for September call ups, that he's not going to be, in some high pressured spots every now and then? It's going to happen. It's going to happen either way. So is he not in the plans for September call-ups? Like, that's now I'm starting to wonder if that's even in the picture at this rate. Because if he's not coming into this into games now to be the sixth starter, just to fill in even for one start, which we saw Blade Tidwell do a little bit earlier in the year, then that's telling me, I really wonder if they're even gonna go ahead and use him at all down the stretch. I could be wrong there, but it's a very bizarre situation to me that makes no sense at all, especially when you're seeing the jolt that Nolan McLean has gave. And I'm not saying Sproat's going to go out there and do the same exact thing, but look at how much Nolan McLean has helped this rotation thus far with the innings, with the fact that it feels like after he went out there, it's like Clay Holmes kind of had a chip on his shoulder there to be like, yeah, I got to go out there and give some good volume myself. And this is another thing too, because there was a
Yeah.
report recently about Tong, how he might be the next guy up. So is Tong ahead of Sproat on the chart? That'd be very interesting and that'd be crazy. But to me, it's just like I don't understand. I just don't understand it when you see what McLean has done to jolt this rotation, and it not only helps with that, but again, you're helping your other starters who are not as good on regular rest.
No, listen, like the fact that I brought up that maybe that they necessarily don't trust Sproat in this situation. Like, okay, fine, like you don't trust him now against the Phillies in this series in late August, but September doesn't get any easier because they have to go to Detroit for a 3-game series. You got to play the Reds a 3-game set there. You got to play the Phillies 4 times in Philly. You got a series against the Padres at home. You got to go to Chicago for a 3-game set against the Cubs. So there's not a lot of easy games in September as well. And September, the pressure is going to be even more amped up because at that point, and I mean, listen, we're going to have to see what happens in these last couple series in August, and also see what the Reds have to do. But you know, September might be those cases like where we get basically like a flashback to where we were watching this team in late September of 2022, where we're basically relying on every single win because the Reds are right behind us, and it's just basically you know we're just dueling out for that final spot. So the pressure is going to be amped up in September, and I mean, yeah, even the thing about the Tong thing, I mean, I could very well see it because Sproat has come up to AAA after dominating through AA pretty easily, and he's had a lot of struggling points in AAA, and it seems like for Tong, like he went through AA very easily. I believe he put up like a 1.3 something ERA, and he's gone into his first 2 starts in Syracuse, and again he's picked off. I mean, he's picked up right where he left off from AA, and again he's dominating there. And listen, like I said, for me with Tong, I'm more in the camp that I want to let these guys marinate down there in AAA and let them develop because I believe for arms, letting you get AAA innings under your arm is very important. But if they see that Tong is just it's just showing something on another level, and they see that he's ready, then I could very well see Tong coming up ahead of Sproat because I think that Tong, and I don't think it's crazy to say that, but Tong has better stuff than Brandon Sproat. I mean, he's seen it like even though, like I said, Sproat dominated AA very easily. Tong just dominated on another level. Like I said, if you're putting up a 1.30 ERA down in AA, I mean, you're clearly doing something right. And then I know it's a small sample size in AAA, and he's only had 2 starts, but even in those 2 starts, I mean, he's striking everybody. He's giving them length. I know there's a bit of concern with maybe Tong's location a little bit and the fact that he can be a little bit wild at times and walk guys a little bit, but I think it's clear to see that Tong is he's clearly pushing for a spot here, because if we're hearing the rumors that that the winds have changed within the organization and that Tong's being very heavily considered, then I would not be surprised if we see Tong over Sproat in these next couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see because if that ends up happening, I mean that's going to make me a little bit more. That's going to start to. I don't know if that should worry me about Sproat or if I should just feel better about Tong or a little bit of both because it's like, uh, I just feel like now should be the time. I don't know, but either way, we got more to talk about throughout the series, and I want to open up the discussion of complaints throughout the series because there's obviously some good things. Like when you look at the first game, you look at the second game, you see Mark Vientos heating up. You see Mark Vientos going out hitting 3 straight home runs. That's great. Juan Soto giving you a clutch moment in the last game and getting on base a lot throughout the series. That was great. It was great to see Lindor stay on fire. But once again, I have to sit here and talk about managerial decisions that bug the ever living piss out of me. So, where do we start? I mean, I think the biggest thing for me was in the game yesterday where there were the thing that annoyed me the most was the David Peterson thing. Still, it's still bothering me, and it's Monday afternoon now. I don't understand how you let David Peterson load the bases. And I texted in the group chat, and we were all thinking it. They're going to wait for the damage to be done, then they're going to pull him. And sure enough, that's what they do in the sixth inning. That annoyed me so much. Then you have the other thing that has been driving me insane so much. When you have Mullins and Taylor both out there in the field, I do not care. Tyrone Taylor has to be playing center field. He is your better defensive center fielder. Cedric Mullins is going to have to get over it and try to play the corners. If not, give me Starling Marte in the corner and let Tyrone Taylor play center field because I'm not trying to watch a lesser center fielder, which would he Taylor have caught that ball? I don't know, but I like his chances more at catching the ball that Profar hit there way more than Cedric Mullins, who's jogging over to the ball, not even making a diving effort, fumbling it when he picks it up. And here comes the second run. Because who knows? Maybe if Taylor's there, at least it's held to one run. And then you tie the game in the ninth inning. Well, we don't know what happens from there. But it's just driving me absolutely insane. I did not like Brazaban being in the game yesterday to face Acuna. That was another thing that drove me insane. I'm not mad at him for putting Gregory Soto in the game. When the bases were loaded, sure, you could argue he should have been pulled and maybe you get aggressive to put Diaz in, but that was the risk that you put with putting Edwin Diaz in game number 2 when you had to get him some work, which I don't kill Mendoza for that. You had to get him work. Um, but my biggest problem is that then you also kind of backtrack here a little bit. Why is it that Gregory Soto was available back-to-back days now, but there was I think, was it the National Series or it might have been the series before? There was an outing where Soto throws 14 pitches, and I just simply wanted Soto to go in to get one out, and they didn't even do that. It was the National
It
Series,
was a
yeah, because
national
Rogers
series.
allowed the hit there. I don't understand some of these decisions. Then there was a decision in one of these other games where I think it was the last game where he pulls Mark Vientos to get pinch ran for, which I get that you want to get aggressive and try to get the run there, but Mark Vientos has been one of your better hitters. You don't know if you're going to need another at bat from him, which didn't matter, but in the moment, it's just something that I thought about. I'm sure I'm forgetting other things, but your thoughts on just the way this series went with the manager. To me, I'm just like, I'm getting so frustrated with where I'm sitting here having to second guess pretty much everything he does because it just seems like there's no feel. He's either leaving starters in too long or pulling them too early. He's not putting guys in the right position to thrive. Your thoughts, though?
Yeah, it's sort of like the thing that I brought up last podcast with Mendoza. It's one of the reasons why over the last couple of weeks and series I've just gotten like really frustrated with him. It's the fact that listen, and it's like I always say, it's not the fact that he makes managerial mistakes because managers will make mistakes from time to time. You're not going to have a 100% perfect decision record. It's the fact that he makes the same mistakes over and over again and it just seems like he doesn't learn from these mistakes whatsoever. And it's like the thing. It's like what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again, without ever changing. And the Peterson thing, it really bothered me. And listen, I'm not blaming the game on David Peterson because up until that point, the sixth inning, he pitched a hell of a game because once he gets to the bottom of the sixth, and he gets he obviously he gets Acuna to ground out, ends up walking Ozuna, gets Albies to ground out. He gives up the single to Michael Harris, and then I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm like, okay, you have Nacho Alvarez. You have Nacho Alvarez up. He's the number 8 hitter. You have the lower part of the order now. To me, I'm like, okay, Peterson, you have to get one more batter here. And for me, depending on what happened, that was Pearson's last batter for me because when you looked at the pitch count, he was already, I believe, up at like 91, 92 pitches around there, up at the time of that situation. And considering and to me, I think the biggest red flag for me why Peterson should have been pulled was just based on how he attacked Nacho Alvarez. Because when you look at the other when you look at the other people he was facing, earlier in that inning, and then a couple innings earlier as well, he was Peterson was going heavy on the fastball. His velo was up. He had a lot of sharpness to both the slider and his curveball, but he was fairly attacking more, going four seamer and sinker first. But then when you started getting to those last two at bats, especially against Michael Harris and then Nacho Alvarez, and then as we see with Sean Murphy, he was going more secondary stuff heavy, and he was afraid and he was afraid more to attack those guys. So to me, when I start to see that your pitcher starts to go more reliant on breaking ball stuff instead of going to your instead of going heavy velo and more heavy fastball stuff, to me at that point it already tells me that okay, this guy's done and his stamina's already drained. So once he gives up the single to Michael Harris, I'm like, okay, you're gonna get one more batter here, David. And then when he walks Nacho Alvarez, to me that was the clear point that you have to go to your bullpen right there, because and I get that Sean Murphy has at that point had a terrible August. I believe he went like 2 for 28 or something like that, or 3 for 29. And but to me, I'm like, listen, you can't chance it. And typically, I'm more of a guy that likes to trust in the starting pitcher to get that final out. But like I said, just the way how he pitched Nacho Alvarez in that last at bat, and how we pitched Michael Harris with going more secondary heavy, I'm like, okay, Peterson's clearly out of energy. He's clearly out of stamina. Get him out of this game. And we saw Mendoza tried to get a little bit more, cute like he typically does, and then end up biting him. Sean Murphy ends up obviously hitting a single out the right field, and then obviously brings in 2 runs to tie up that game. And then obviously like you
Let
talked
me just
about,
jump in real
yeah,
quick with the Pearson thing. The other key note on that is he's on regular rest
yeah,
and he's losing the zone.
yeah, no, and then the other thing, like you brought up with the whole Taylor and Mullins thing. Listen, looking back at that play, and maybe I have to watch that play back again. Even if Taylor is in center field, I don't think he even gets that ball. But I agree with you that Tyrone Taylor is the better defender over Cedric Mullins, so you should be playing him in center field. And like I said, the thing with me for Mullins, and typically I'm someone, I don't like my outfielders to play superhero in a way where they're constantly diving for everything to try to make diving plays. Obviously for me it depends on the certain situation, because there is a time and a place to play like superhero in that situation, to try to get that to try and dive to get that final out. For me, that was the time to try being aggressive, and dive, because you're only in the bottom of the eighth. If the runs score, the game most likely it's going to be tough for the Mets to come back, considering that they haven't had a single comeback past the eighth inning. So for me, I think Mull should have dove for that ball. Obviously he didn't, and then obviously he ended up fumbling the ball anyways there, and 2 runs came across the score. And like I said, even if Taylor is in center field, I don't think he gets that ball, but at least Taylor at least dives for it. He tries to be aggressive, and like I said, put your players in the best situation to succeed. And if you put Taylor there, like I said, maybe he doesn't get to that ball, but I like his chances a lot better getting to that ball than Mullins.
Or like I said, at the very least, he plays it the right way to where
Yeah,
it's held to 1 run versus 2 runs there. And I trust Taylor's arm. I mean, Mullins, just his arm is
Mullins has a
so
noodle. He has a noodle arm.
it's so bad. Either way though, yeah, I mean, it's so annoying, the point that you made about it all. Just like, my problem with these mistakes is that it's the same type of mistakes over and over again. It's one thing if, every now and then he's making mistakes, and even if they are the same ones every now and then, it's the fact that it's like every series there's at least one time where I'm like, you just made this mistake the last time. Like, if it's Clay Holmes, for example, and I'm not saying that there was anything wrong this series, but like, there were times earlier this year where it's like, dude, you just watch Clay Holmes labor in the fifth, sixth inning, his last start. Why are you trying to push your luck even more with this? It's so frustrating when it's the same mistakes over and over again. But yeah, I mean, that's really just, that's the story of the season in general. It's like, there's so much frustration from everything, and it's annoying how I have to talk this way about a series win, because, even in that game one that they won, I was annoyed with Reed Garrett and Ryan Helsley. Like, could those guys start to find their rhythm, please? Like, I don't trust, outside of Edwin Diaz, I don't fully trust, and maybe Brooks Raley right now. I don't fully trust anyone in this bullpen. Like every now, Rogers is kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Soto's 1 foot in, 1 foot out with the circle of trust. Everyone else, forget about it. Garrett has been terrible. Rosbon, I don't trust. Helsley, don't even get me started with him. And then Stanek, obviously, we don't trust him. So it's like, the one thing that I can't kill Mendoza for is that these guys, Helsley and Garrett in that first game, just horrible from those two.
I think for me, when you look at that first game, at least because I know Garrett has been struggling and he hasn't been good over these last couple weeks, but and I think you can get away more with that just because Reed Garrett has been pushed out of that situation of being one of the the top end arms in that bullpen, and you don't have to necessarily rely on him to give you big outs. Helsley though, that's the much bigger problem because this is a guy that you gave up prospects for him. And listen, I'm not saying that you gave up the best prospects for him, but you still gave up something to get Ryan Helsley. And other than his first outing out of the bullpen, he has not been good at all. And I'm not sure what the problem is because again, like he has the heavy fastball velo. Like he's shown this year, he's able to hit 102, 103 at times and consistently hits 101. He has a fairly good slider. He has a fairly good splitter. I'm not sure what the problem is. Is it a fact that he can't just pitch in New York? He can't handle the pressure, which is we've seen that with some guys before. I think the most notable one is Sonny Gray when the Yankees acquired him at the 2017 trade deadline. Maybe it's the fact that even they brought it up on the broadcast yesterday on Pix 11. Maybe it's he's tipping pitches because I mean, listen, if he's tipping pitches, he has to figure that out like right away. And listen, that's also we've talked about coaching plenty of times on here, but then if he's tipping his pitches, why isn't Jeremy Hefner going to him and looking at the video and then working with him to figure out and try to fix those tips? So to me, I'm not sure what the problem is with Helsley, but he is a huge problem in this bullpen right now. And considering because I remember when we did the stream of when we acquired Helsley and Rogers, I said that the main thing I was excited for with Helsley is you have that back end shutdown duo of Diaz and Helsley. And maybe you could give Diaz some extra rest because you don't have to constantly rely on him to give you those big outs late in games, and you could kind of switch off and go like, okay, Helsley goes one game, Diaz goes another game, or if you're in a tough spot where it's a game where you have to win, and the opposing lineup that you're facing is a deep lineup, you could go, okay, Helsley, you get me 3 outs, and then Diaz get me 3 outs to finish this game. But with Helsley, you can't even trust them against like like the bad part of the lineup because even then with the Braves at that point, because it was already like a 12-4 game, 12-3 game at that point, they start subbing out some of their key guys. And, Helsley was just struggling basically against some of the bench guys for the Braves. And it's like, Helsley is such a huge concern. And like I said, I'm not sure what the problem is, but they have to figure out something with him.
Yeah, if it is tipping pitches, then it needs to get fixed out. If it's not that, then we have bigger problems. Like that's the thing. I don't know what you do anymore, but that first game, it's just like everything was fine up until that moment for me, where it's like the one thing, because the offense, I said it during that post game, that's not going to sustain from what they gave in that game, which is unrealistic. But the one thing that I would have liked to see is those two at least righting a little bit of the wrongs, and righting the ship is more the term that I should use there. Righting the ship is what I was hoping for there, and nope, did the ass opposite. If anything, they made me trust them even less, which I didn't think was possible. And then outside of that, I mean, even in game two, it's just like with the offense, just to talk about that, um, you know, they went off offensively, sure, but 1 for 10 still with runners in scoring position in that game. So even though the offense has been better, putting up runs and everything, and every now and then they have these offensive explosions, I'm going into the series still feeling the way that I did after the National Series, where I'm very concerned because not only with the bullpen, not only with some of the starting pitching, but this offense. I mean, I don't know how much of it's going to sustain, if any at all, considering the pitchers that you went against. And again, you need to beat up on those bad pitchers. I'm not going to sit here and say, discredit them for that, because I'd be very pissed if they weren't hitting off those pitchers, i.e., yesterday's game with Bryce Elder. But I need to see this offense do it tonight against Sanchez. I need them to show it against this type of team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think with the thing with the offense, and listen, I'll never be fully convinced from this offense until like Barnes and Chavez go, because even then, like, sure, they give you like the occasional game where they go off offensively because they put up 12 runs in the first game. They ended up putting 9 runs on the second game. But then even when you look at the third game, right, and even like I said, for me, like when I talk about these big offensive performances, I'm not asking for 9 runs every night. I'm not asking for 12 runs every night. But if the Mets yesterday score 5 to 6 runs, they end up winning that game. It's simple as that. And they had opportunities. They did, because I forgot which inning it was, but Ronnie Mauricio ended up coming at bat with the guy on second base. He ends up striking out. Pete Alonso, even when you look at, because I remember there was an at bat earlier in the game, he came up with bases loaded. He ended up, I forgot whether he struck out or he popped out. But then, when you look at the final inning of this game in the top of the ninth, he comes up after Juan Soto delivers an RBI single to cut the lead down to 4-3. He comes up, him and McNeil. They're both unable to come up big, and the Mets end up losing that game. But even then, you look at that last game, the Mets were 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position. That's You're not gonna win. You're not gonna win ball games like that. And I know they got away with it because they went 1 for 10 in that second game. But the difference between the second game and the third game was the second game they were hitting home runs. What they hit like six something home runs, 5 home runs in that game, something like that. And like Frank brought this up when he was doing his post games, and make sure you guys subscribe to Mets Weekly because they're going to do a show later today as well, breaking down this Brave series. But even he said, listen, if you're not going to come up big with runners in scoring position, at least when you have runners on first and stuff like that, you have to hit home runs. You have to do damage. So they were able to get away with that in the second game. But the third game, when you look at it, you only got a home run from Mark Vientos in what I believe the third inning. And then other than that, it was basically more of the same that from what we saw this year, where they got guys in position because, like I said, they had a guy on second base when Mauricio was up, couldn't come through, and then there was multiple times where Pete came up with run scoring position, and he couldn't come through. So, and when you play games like that, eventually it's going to catch up to you, and the Mets came up short in that game.
I'm glad you brought up Pete in this comment here, because you know what I've noticed with Pete Alonso over the past few weeks, especially ever since that tweet that we broke down from Mets Analytics. I have noticed that it's so clear when you watch a lot of these at bats, he's trying to hit it to the opposite field. Like, it is so obvious that he's looking to go the other way, and it's driving me so insane. But this is what happens when you have a hitting coach that enables this, which I'm not going to go on a tangent about it because I'm trying to go the episode without talking about that hitting coach and go into a full rant about it, because it's every episode that we've done it. But it is so annoying watching Pete Alonso look like he's trying to go to the opposite field. I mean, even on the home run,
Yeah,
how did that
100%.
ball get out? Like, I don't understand how that got out. And once again, going opposite field when you have a bat that hit 50 home runs his first season in the league and has that potential to do it on a consistent basis, but instead it's being minimized by this opposite field approach. It's ridiculous. It drives me so insane, and that's something that's worrisome. And again, just like yesterday's game really bothered me the most, because it's like, show some sort of clutch late in these games with this. Like, if the offense showed me some sort of fight back late in the game, I'd be feeling a bit better going into the series. But unfortunately not. And then once again in yesterday's game, they did the thing that they've done for multiple weeks now, which is not hit the bullpen until Iglesias came in, who's had a rough year. But why are you not hitting Tyler Kinley? Tyler Kinley stinks. It's just because they had 3 hits, I believe, too, until that ninth inning.
Yeah, they did.
I can't get myself convinced on this offense, even though the again, the runs have been there over the past couple weeks in a couple of these games, but then you see these games, and this is the part that's annoying me when people are posting the stats with the offense and being like, "Oh, but look at this." Okay, one, what's the record? Two, the context matters here. A lot of these offensive games and a lot of the offensive stats are boosted by these 1 or 2 games here and there where they're scoring, 10 plus runs, scoring 12, 13 runs, whatever it is. But what about the games where they're not doing that? What about that Milwaukee series where they're not doing that? What about yesterday? Like the context matters in these things. What about the Cleveland series, especially that one?
Yeah.
The context matters with these numbers. So you could tell me, oh, the offense has been better in August statistically. Just look at the run totals and look at, some of these numbers. Okay, what's their record in August? Is it translating to wins?
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at the national series, right? Like that first game, they go in there, they win 8-1. Everyone's hitting pretty well, and then you go to the second and third game. They only put up 4 runs in that second game, and they only put up 3 runs in that third game. And the biggest factor for me is, again, like we talk about with not able to hit bullpens, because especially when you look at the third game, the Mets, their 3 runs, they came off against Mackenzie Gore, and then the Nationals bullpen comes in, and it's not like the Nationals have a good bullpen. There's a lot of guys in that bullpen trotting out with high fours ERA and high fives ERA, and the Mets offense couldn't even hit that bullpen. So it's like I said, it's more the fact that this offense is just inconsistent. And the games where they put up eight plus runs, or like 9 runs or 10 runs, those are more outliers than what they are the regular.
Yeah. It's just again, like we talked about after that national series too. What's the outlier? What's not? And it's very clear that the outlier is those kind of games. Did you have anything else you wanted to recap with the series? Because I feel like we touched a good amount of the topics there. But yeah, I don't know if you had anything else to add before we get to the chat, see what you guys are saying right now about this, and then talk about the series coming up.
I mean, there's not really much more we can talk about. I mean, the only other thing I could say is it's at least nice to see that Vientos is showing a bit of life here, and I do like the fact that because we talk about with Alonso and the fact that over these last couple weeks since he's broken the record that he's been looking to take the ball more to the opposite field. Well, at least the positive that I see with Vientos is okay. There are some occasional balls where he's looking, or at least where he's taking the ball to the opposite field, but a lot of his home runs that he's hit over these last couple games, they've been pulling the ball, and it looks like he's finally getting some confidence. So, listen, I'm not saying that this is going to sustain, but at least it's nice to see that Vientos is showing some sort of life, and it looks like the bat speed's been up a little bit more. He still kind of struggles to hit the breaking ball a little bit, but at least he looks a lot more comfortable hitting the fastball, which is something that he was very good last year with. So listen, it just sucks that because you had Alvarez starting to heat up after he came back from AAA, and the fact that he got hurt now. So it would have been nice to have both Alvarez and Vientos firing on all cylinders, because maybe if they have Alvarez's bat in the lineup yesterday, maybe they win that game. Even with Brandon Nimmo, he's had the stiff neck. I know he ended up pinch hitting yesterday, but still, he only had that one at bat. So yeah, listen, like I said, it just sucks that you can't have Alvarez available right now, because it would be very nice to see if both Vientos and Alvarez going off power wise, and then even then with Brett Beatty. Listen, I know we're not necessarily great, big Brett Beatty fans, but listen, you got to give credit where credit is due. He had a very nice road trip. Statistically, at least. Listen, if you want to break down and look at some of the pitches he's been hitting and some of the pitchers he's been hitting off against, cool. But listen, I'll just call it how it is. He had a very nice series offensively for me, or at least a nice road trip for me offensively, which is at least new, because we've seen the breakdown in splits between Brett Beatty when he's hitting at City Field, and then when he's hitting on the road. You know, he hits very well at home, and then all of a sudden when he gets on the road, he can't hit a beach ball. But these last two series, both against the Braves and Nationals, he's had very good series.
I can't give Beatty credit, but yeah, he had a good road trip. Vientos though, yeah, hopefully we're actually starting to see him truly turn the corner here. Uh, just because again, like that's been part of the dynamic they've missed all season long is not having the Vientos they had from last year. That would at least be a positive if he's gonna start to hit that way. But let's see what you guys are saying in the chat now before we talk about the series coming up a little bit. Even though I think we covered a good amount of the comments. Beatty's been playing amazing for a while now. No comment. No comment. I it doesn't fit my agenda, so I will not give him credit. Um, have to score 12 runs for a chance of winning. Unfortunately, that's partially true because his bullpen stinks. And it's so annoying because we thought that this bullpen was going to be unstoppable with all the trades they made. Nope. Now it's to the point where I have no I don't care that all these guys are rentals. I'm more happy that these guys are rentals than anything at this point. Yes, there
Mm.
will be a post game show. We're also going to be at the games tomorrow and Wednesday. So those post game shows will be a little bit later, which I apologize for. Um, let's see. Is there anything else that I
Yeah,
missed? This,
that's the other thing that even Hornagags brought up. McNeil has been very good over these last couple weeks, and I know he's relatively had a
yeah,
good season, but McNeil has been very good. And I mean, even Carson's brought it up before because, when you look at McNeil when he first came up, in the major leagues back in 2018, 2019, he was more of that contact guy. But, ever since, opposing hitters, I mean, or opposing pitchers have figured him out, he's had to make that adjustment. And, he's made that adjustment. He's gone more away from being that slap hitter. And, he's starting to show his power, and he's starting to be clutch in these situations. I mean, even, that home run that he hit in that second game because let's not forget how close the Mets were, or at least how close they were to blowing that inning because Lindor ends up leading off that top of the third with a single. Juan Soto walks. They both end up executing a double steal. So you have second and third with no outs, and then Pete grounds out. Viento strikes out, and you're like, oh, here we go again. The offense is not going to be able to come up clutch here, and then McNeil steps up and just pulls a fastball into the chop house, and then all of a sudden the Mets get off that 3-0 lead, and if they don't get any runs there, that ball game could very well go another direction, and the Braves could have very easily won that game. So it's good to see that McNeil's been able to come up clutch in this because I know he didn't start off the season great, but ever since I believe like late May till now, McNeil has been very good.
yeah, I gotta give credit where it's due with that too. Yeah, Jeff McNeil's played pretty good, but now that I picked him up in fantasy again, I'm sure that he's gonna start to struggle. So that's just the way it goes. Because I picked him up earlier, he was, good for a week for me. Then he cooled off, and then dropped him, and now he's on fire again. But anyway, the Mets have their series against the Phillies coming up. The pitching matchups are as follows: Christopher Sanchez versus Kodai Senga tonight. In game two, Jesus Luzardo versus Sean Manaea. And in game number three, Taiwan Walker versus Nolan McLean. I expect them to drop the series, unfortunately. Lose. I expect them to go 1-3. I'll say that or 1-2 rather. They win one of these games. That's my prediction. Unfortunately, like I always say, prove me wrong.
Yeah, I think they drop the series as well. I said they lose the first game just because Christopher Sanchez has had a very good year. Kodai Senga, we know that he hasn't pitched well on regular rest so far through his short MLB career. So I expect them to lose today's game. Tuesday's game, it's a little more 50-50. I know Jesus Lazaro started off the season very well, but he's kind of cooled off since the beginning of the year. His ERA is now up to a 4.10 ERA. But then even then with Sean Manaea, we've seen he starts games well, but then he kind of drops off more when we get to that fourth, fifth inning. So we'll see how that is. Like I said, I could see that game going 50-50, but I think the Phillies will win that game. I think they win the third game though because Taiwan Walker, former New York Met, Taiwan Walker's not that good of a pitcher ever since he signed that contract in Philadelphia, and then with Nolan McLean on the mound, I think they end up winning that game. I think that the key thing here is, especially when I look at Mania for that second game, considering Mania is a lefty, and when you look at a lot of that Phillies, when you look at a lot of the Phillies bigger bats, they're lefties. Schwarber, Harper, the the two most dangerous guys in that lineup. You got to be able to shut that down. You got to be able to shut them down. So, and especially with Kyle Schwarber, because what I believe now he's up to like 40 something home runs. He's been very good this year, and like we always say, hopefully the Mets end up signing him in free agency next year. But we'll get to that point when we cross that bridge. But yeah, ultimately I think the Phillies take this series two out of three. But like you say, like I always say, prove us wrong.
The biggest thing for me would be, not only winning the series or sweeping the series, if in one of these games, it's not going to happen. I can tell you this for free. But by some miracle, they have a comeback win or a walk-off win against Johan Duran. That is something that would get me excited. That would move me
Yeah.
in some sort of way. But I unfortunately have a better chance of winning the lottery. So do you guys. Uh, but I think that's really all we
Yeah.
have to talk about here, unless you had something else you
Yeah,
were gonna say.
I mean, the only other thing, obviously, we heard the news that because obviously, over the last couple weeks, you heard that Wheeler had that blood clot on his shoulder, and now he has to end up getting surgery for thoracic outlet syndrome, and we know that surgery can be kind of a career killer now because we've seen Matt Harvey, his career got devastated with thoracic outlet syndrome. Steven Strasburg, the guy that most recently had that syndrome, that surgery after getting his big contract after winning the World Series in 2019. So listen, like we always say, Wheeler, obviously, he is a rival. He is the ace pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. But former Met, I always like Zach Wheeler. So he's gonna be out 6 to 8 months now. After getting that surgery. So hopefully he recovers. Hopefully he has that surgery. He recovers, and he ends up getting back on that mound before he ends up ultimately retiring. Because I know that he is already up there in age, and there has been those rumors that he's gonna end up retiring after his contract plays out. But hopefully Wheeler is able to come back from that surgery and be healthy.
Yeah, especially with, like you said, how much that's usually a career killer. Hopefully he could defy the odds of that, even though, it sucks seeing the Phillies have success. I still want to see Zach Wheeler be healthy and have success, though. I would never root against him that much to where I'd want him to be injured and everything. So hopefully he'll end up being okay. But yeah, we're gonna wrap things up here. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live next. And we'll see you guys in the next one.